Today, our group are going to do the presentation on history of economic thought. I am Tang Junhan with matching number 277524. Our group are going to discuss the topic for marginalist school, the five major questions and the contribution of William Stanley Joubert, Anthony Augustine Conan, and Francis Y. Edward in developing the idea of that school. This is our group member, Ni Ching Eun, Tang Junhan, No Amira Ahmad, Tashana Anara Perempuan Rabi, Tegashini Aruna Perempuan Ratar Krishnan. First, we start with the introduction. The marginalist school began in 1871 when Joubert and Mackay published their influential books on marginal utility theory. Several foreigners created use of marginal analysis in economics, while several second-generation marginalists expanded their theories further. This school became part of neoclassical economy of contemporary macroeconomics. Then our group are going to discuss our topic based on the five major questions of contribution of Joubert, Conan, and Edward in developing the ideas of the marginalist school. And this is all the five major questions. Now I will discuss about the first major question. What was the historical background of the school? There are serious economic and social problems remain unsolved even 100 years after the revolutions of industry. The first problem is the poverty. The poverty was widespread although productivity was increasing dramatically. The second one, the extremely uneven distribution of wealth and income created much dissatisfaction even though the general standard of living was rising. Then the third one, the business fluctuation affected many people, which individuals could not no longer depend on their own initiative and abilities to overcome their conditions. Now we come to the next problem. Farmers and farm laborers had their own difficulties and caused them to migrate into cities to find work. The long working hours, dangerous and unhealthy working conditions is also a problem. The dominant power of employer in bargaining with workers, rise of monopolistic powers, and insecure old age caused people to find solutions beyond classical economic thinking. Now we look at the trend of 19th century in Europe was to develop three approaches to overcome social problems. The first one, to promote socialism. The second one, to bolster trade unionism. The third one, to demand government intervention in the economy. However, the marginalists oppose all those three solutions and they support the classical school. That's just fact. The marginalists defended market allocations and distributions, deplored government intervention, denounced socialism, and sought to discourage labor unionism as either inefficient or pernicious. Marginalists believe that though the value and distribution theories of the classical economy were insecure, but their policy is suitable. Now I will pass the next part to my friend.
Good day everyone. My name is Yegashini Radhakrishnan and my matrix number is 281707. So today I will be presenting the major tenets of marginalist school. There are 10 major tenets of marginalist school and let me explain the first one. The first major tenet of this school is focused on the margin. The school always focus on the changing point of the margin where decisions are made. The second major tenet of marginalist school is rational economic behavior. Marginalists assume that people act rationally in balancing pleasures and pains, in measuring marginal utilities of different goods, and also in balancing present against future needs. The next major tenet is microeconomic emphasis. Marginalists consider individual decision making rather than the whole economy, or also known as the aggregate economy or macroeconomics. Most of the theories are formed based on the microeconomy aspects. The next major tenet is the use of abstract method, which is also known as the deductive method. Abstract is a deductive method that is used to process some principle from general form to its outcome. The marginalists reject the historical method and prefer this method. The next one is pure competition emphasis. Marginalists normally base their analysis on the assumption of pure competition market. In this market, sellers are free to enter the market and consumers are free to make choice among products. The market price is set due to the interaction of numerous consumers. Another major tenet of marginalist school is demand-oriented price theory, which means the market price is determined by the consumer demands. For the early marginalists, demand became the primary force of price determination. So there are three types of demand-based pricing, which is known as price discrimination, price skimming, and also price penetration. Demand-oriented price theory is a method of pricing in which the seller attempts to set the price at the level that the intended buyers are willing to pay. The next one is the emphasis on subjective utility. Subjective utility means consumer satisfaction through purchasing a product. The marginalists think that the demand should depend on the marginal utility, which is a subjective phenomenon. And for your kind information, marginal utility is the additional utility a person receives from consuming an additional unit of a particular product. The next one is equilibrium approach. Marginalists believe that economic force generally tend toward equilibrium, which is a balance point of opposing force. Whenever disturbances cause dislocations, new movements occur towards equilibrium point. Another major tenet of marginalist school is merger of land with capital goods. They combine land and capital resources, then talk about the advantages that can be get from those results to find the most fruitful usage that can maximize their gain. The marginalists lumped land and capital resource together in their analysis and spoke of interest, rent, and also profits as being the return to property resources. For example, as a landowner, he or she receives rent, and as an entrepreneur, he or she receives profit. The last one will be the minimal government involvement. Most of the tourists, of course, are built under the permits of competitive market. So in their mind, the government should not always interfere the economic environment. The marginalists continued the classical school's defense of minimal government involvement in the economy as their most desirable policy. So the buyers and sellers are always free to operate with minimal government intervention. That's all from me. Thank you. Now I'll pass the presentation to my group member.
Now I am going to explain about the third major questions. Who did the school benefit or seek to the benefit? The benefit here we are speaking of the providing a better understanding of how the free market system can allocate resources more efficiently and promote economic liberty rather than classifications by a classical school. And the benefits are separate to all the parties. The parties here we are talking of the workers, landowner, wealthy people, employer, and those who resisted changes. The workers get benefit by showing that the worker receive wages that are equal to their contributions. Those who resisted change get benefit. Those who are interested in maintaining their status quo. Employer by opposing union and by attributing unemployment to the wages that were artificially high and inflexible downward. The landowner defend landlord against attack based on Richardian rent theory. And the last one, the wealthy people get benefit by opposed to the government intervention that might redistribute income. And now the fourth major question, how was the marginal school valid, useful, or correct in its time? Number one, development of the geometric diagram and mathematical technique. The development of the new powerful tools of analysis, especially geometric diagram and mathematical technique, economy become more exact social science. You can see here the geometric diagram and the mathematical techniques. Second, we look at the importance of demand in determining the prices. Conditions of demand were given their rightful importance as one set of determinants for prices for both final goods and factors of productions. Classical economists emphasize only on supply, cost of productions as the significant determinant of exchange value, the price. The third one, the use of the assumption in economics analysis. Popularizations the concept of assumption in the economy, contrary to the classical school, which neglect the assumption in study. Marginalist school want to put assumption in economic analysis, but classical school do not. Now the fourth one, partial equilibrium analysis, useful for extracting from the complexity of the real world, allowing one variable at a time to change while holding all other variables temporarily constant, jitter variables, enable the investigator to dissect complex phenomena one step at a time. The problems of the immensely complicated society with its countless variables was thereby simplified and penetrated in an orderly and systematic manner. Now, the fifth one, microeconomic approach, complement the macroeconomic approach. Macroeconomy may overlook many problems by viewing the economy as a whole. For example, certain group of people may become increasingly impoverished, although average real per capita income for the nation may be rising. Thank you. I will pass the next part to my friends.
Good afternoon, sir and everyone. My name is Lee Chip and the metric 277409. Now I will present the part which tenets of the marginalist school become lasting contribution. First, marginalist and neoclassical employment theory. Keynes points to the alleged fallacy of composition associated with marginalist and classical employment theory. If one cut off an employee wages, it would not affect the purchasing power because they normally buy only a negligible portion of its output, and cut off the wages can produce the product at a lower price. However, if all the firm take action to cut wages for all employees, the market will sinking rather than expanding. From Keynesian view, there are automation means to reduction in nominal wages to a full employment situation. Next, the tendency of the marginalist will become lasting contribution is per competition. Pretty argued that assumption of the per competition was a reasonable abstraction looking back now from the 1870s, but it was too restrictive to be useful was competition decline after the year. So today the per competition can be found in a few of sector of economy. So institutionally economic context, the historical and is the institutional factor nominated rational individual calculation in the determine such as the range of worldly consumer behavior and wages rate. So this assumption become outdated as the new event transferred and new economic theory developed. Next, the tendency of the marginalist school become lasting contribution because the marginalist fails to expand the economic growth and business cycle. And they also use the relative method. So the analysis of the thinker originally used the relative method was static, timeless, and unsubstantiated with empirical evidence. So this relative method challenged by inductive method that can run in the German historical school. It became the lasting contribution even despite the critics many of the marginalist theory can be found in our textbook of Principle of Economy and Microeconomy. So among the contribution school we still learn until now is the mathematical economy, the strict monopoly model, theory of diminishing utility, the theory of rational consumer choice, and the law of diminishing marginal return. The important economics in the marginalist school that we should not is the Anthony Augustine Carnot. The second is the William Stanley Jevons, and the third is the Francis Y. Edwards. Carnot derived that a firm can maximize their profit when N all equal MC. Assumption PC and MC equal 0. Total profit will be maximized when PR equal P times Q greater. Each additional 1 unit, the price will increase at its own value in PR. Monopoly maximize PR when NR equal MC equal 0. This rule applies in situations where numerous competition exists. The second important economist in the marginalist school is the William Stanley Jevons, who born in Liverpool, England at 1835. Jevons studied chemistry and botany at University College London, UCL. Because of the bankruptcy of his father's business in 1847, Jevons left his study to take up a position of assessor at the mines in remained there for 5 years. He then resumed his studies at UCL on his return to England, published several books on logic and became professor of logic, political economy and philosophy at Manchester and later at UCL. Invented a logic machine, exhibited before the Royal Society in 1870. Famous as a historian of science and made outstanding contributions to development in index number, Jevons was extremely introvert and did not have great influence on his immediate peers or studies. Jevons learned that value depends entirely upon utility. Labor determines value, but only in an indirect manner, by varying the degree of utility of commodity through an increase or limitation of supply. Unlike Ricardo, who is the economist for the classical school, may say that peers have value because people need to live for them. But for the Jevons, who is the economist for the marginary school, believes that peers have value because buyers get utility for them. The specific level of utility associated with the peer depends on the number of peers people presently possess. To explain Jevons' value theory, we must therefore begin with his theory of the law of diminishing marginal utility. Then our attention will turn to his related nation of rational consumer behavior, individual and market exchange, and the optimal amount of work.
Next, I will explain on theory of diminishing marginal utility. There are 4 main points when it comes to utility. Firstly, is that utility cannot be measured with tools. Utility is not something physical. Thus, it's a given that there is no tools and it cannot be measured by tools because it is not something that can be seen or something that can be measured physically. And secondly, utility can only be measured by observing human behavior and preference. As I mentioned before, utility cannot be measured with tools. But we can measure it by observing people's behavior and preference. Because utility is someone's liking or dislike towards something or a product. So whether their liking towards satisfaction towards it increases or decreases is what we observe and translate it as utility. And thirdly, Jevons rejected any attempt to compare the level of pleasure and pain among different people. This means that Jevons believed that pain and pleasure cannot be compared between 2 different individuals because there are many factors that would be affecting each individual's choice. There might be their own preference, their lifestyle, their earnings. There are so many things that would affect a single person's choice towards preference towards something. So we cannot compare the pain and pleasure of 2 different people. And fourthly, Jevons believed that a single person can compare utilities of a single good and marginal utilities of several goods. Which means that although 2 different people cannot be compared in terms of pleasure and pain, one single person can compare their own utility of the goods that they are consuming or using and the marginal utilities of several goods, whether they prefer one more than the other, how much satisfaction towards one product decreases or increases in correlation to the other product. So this is what Jevons believed. Diminishing marginal utility can be explained as when more of the same goods is consumed, the satisfaction of consuming the goods will decrease. And this will automatically decrease the marginal utility. For example, if we have one whole large pizza, the first bite of the pizza will be when our utility is really high because we're really excited to eat it, we're looking forward to it. So our satisfaction in eating that pizza will be really high. But once we finish eating half of the pizza, our satisfaction level will decline. So as satisfaction declines, our marginal utility will also decline. We will not feel as excited to eat the next bite of pizza because our satisfaction level has gone down. This is a simple explanation of diminishing marginal utility. Based on the graph here, the graph on the top represents total utility while the graph at the bottom represents marginal utility. As we can see, as total utility increases, the marginal utility is positive. It's declining, but it's still positive, which means the person's satisfaction is still there. They still feel excited. For example, the pizza example that I gave earlier. So after eating the first slice of pizza, you're still looking forward to the second slice of pizza. Your satisfaction level has decreased, but it is still positive. You are still looking forward to it. And when total utility is at the maximum level, the marginal utility will be 0, which means beyond that, we will not get any form of satisfaction from consuming the product, from eating the pizza, for example. And as total utility declines, the marginal utility is negative, which means we no longer feel any form of satisfaction consuming the product. In fact, we would feel dissatisfied with it, which is why it is negative. Next, I will explain the equimarginal rule for making rational choice. The equimarginal rule can be explained when the price of two goods are the same, let's say good X and good Y. If the price of both goods is the same amount of income will be allocated so that the last dollar spent on both goods will result in equal marginal utility. This means, let's say a pen and a pencil cost 1 ringgit each. So, as an individual who wants both of these products, I would spend all of my income, let's say 100 ringgit, on both of these products because they're equally priced. So which means I would spend 50 ringgit on the pen and 50 ringgit on the pencil, so that my marginal utility for both products will be same. So the ratio of the marginal utility over the price of good X will be the same with the ratio of marginal utility of product Y over price Y. But what if the ratio of the marginal utility of X over the price of X is more than the ratio of the marginal utility of Y over the price of Y? In this scenario, the consumer gets higher satisfaction from consuming goods X. So the consumer will buy more of goods X. And as the consumer continues to buy more of good X, the marginal utility for this good X will reduce, which also would reduce the ratio of the marginal utility of X over price of X. The consumer will continue buying goods X until the ratio of the marginal utility of X over price of X is same with the marginal utility of Y over the price of Y. When the ratio of the marginal utility is the same, the consumer's total utility is at the maximum level. And this is the ultimate goal that consumers are going for. Vice versa, let's say the ratio of the marginal utility of product Y over price Y is more than the ratio of the marginal utility of product X over the price of X. The consumer will then buy more of goods Y, and which will result in a decline in the marginal utility of Y as well as the ratio of the marginal utility of Y over the price of Y. And the consumer will continue buying goods Y until the ratio of the marginal utility of Y over price Y is equal to the marginal utility of X over the price of X. Next, let's look into the theory of exchange, where utility is used as a determinant of exchange. For example, let's say there are two people, person A and person B. Person A only has beef, which means their ratio of marginal utility of beef over the price of beef is much lesser than the marginal utility of corn over price corn. This means they are also willing to give up beef to obtain corn because their marginal utility for beef is really high and they want to exchange it to have more corns. Whereas on the other side, person B only has corns. So their ratio of marginal utility of corn over price corn is lesser than the marginal utility of beef over price beef. So this person B who only has corn is also willing to give up corn to obtain beef. This is both of these people are doing so in order to achieve maximum utility. This chart shows the flow of how the exchange happens between the person who has beef and the person who has only corn. So let's say the marginal utility of beef is 100 and the price of beef is 10 ringgit. And the marginal utility of corn is 10 while the price of corn is 1 ringgit. So the exchange happens until the marginal utility of beef over price of beef is same with the marginal utility of corn over the price of corn. It can also be seen numerically based on the marginal utility and price that have been stated earlier. that we would receive a ratio of 10-10. So it means that the marginal utility for both products is now at the same level. So this would result in a maximized utility for both person A and person B. So once this maximum utility is achieved, the exchange stops. Next, let's look into labor. Jevons refutes the labor theory of value from the classical school. He believes that labor cannot be the regulator of value. He came to this conclusion because he believes that labor has unequal value as it differs in quality and efficiency. The economic problem revolving around labor is that we want to satisfy our wants with the least possible sum of labor, which results with the workers needing to compare the pain of work to the pleasure of earning. Labor is a subjective psychological cause. It is a painful exertion. Thus, the worker must compare the pain of working and the pleasure of earning to find the perfect balance to work as well as earn at the same time. This graph represents Jevons' equilibrium between the pain of working and the pleasure of earning. There are two curves that are being used here, which is the degree of utility of real wages, which represents the marginal utility of earnings, and the net pain of labor curve, which represents the marginal disutility of work. As we can see, the point where the marginal utility of earnings and the marginal disutility of work can be found at the balance level is at point M. This shows that point M is the optimal amount of work that a worker can do to earn in a workday, which means this is the maximum amount of work that the worker is willing to do to get paid for.
Thank you, Dasana. First of all, my name is Nur Amira binti Ahmad and my metric number is 277674. Now, I will proceed to explain about Francis Ward Edward. Francis Ward Edward was born in Ireland and studied at Oxford University. He also became the true professor of political economy and the founder of Royal Economic Society. His contribution to economy is found in his mathematical physics in 1881. The three particular standout of Edward's contribution to the content of economic thought is he is the origin idea of indifferent curve. The second one is he also the first economist who discussed the pricing behavior of oligopolies. And then the third one is he elucidated the difference between the average and marginal product. In his mathematical physics, Edward introduced the notion curve of indifference, which is, he said, the various combination of the two items that will yield an equal level of utility to an individual. The different curve graph is to analyze and isolate exchange between two sole professors of product, which is Robinson Crusoe, labor S1, and Friday, money X2. Okay, this graph shows the indifferent curve. Based on this indifferent curve, we can see Friday indifferent curve further to the east, which is curve 2, with greater total utility to Friday then curve 1, and curve 3 more than 2. Crusoe indifferent curve further to the north, which is the curve 2 Roman, here greater total utility to Crusoe than curve 1 Roman, and curve 3 Roman more than 2 Roman. By overlaying Crusoe indifferent map on the Friday map, Edward obtained that the contract curve, which is the lowest of the density point of the two set of indifferent curve. He concluded that the price of the Friday labor in the term of Crusoe money is indeterminate, that it is subject to bargaining. It is because Edward said that all the points other than those of the line ABC, either Friday or Crusoe, can add to his utility without decreasing the utility gained by the other party. Okay, now we can see by noting point D at Crusoe indifferent curve Roman 1 and Friday indifferent curve 1. Crusoe can attain curve Roman 3 rather than Roman 1 at A while still leaving Friday on his indifferent curve 1. Or we can look at Friday perspective. Friday can achieve the highest utility associated with his indifferent curve tree at C without reducing Crusoe utility. Hence, the self-interest of the two traders will push them to the contract curve. Friday would prefer at the line C on his curve because it will place him on the indifferent curve tree. But Crusoe will prefer at A line because it will provide him more utility than other point, which is point B or point C. The final contact between the two traders in this case is indeterminate because the point of the contract curve is possible point of equilibrium and the final outcome will occur through the bargaining. This theory can be reconstructed by Italian economist by Vilfredo Pareto, and his diagram also can be found at intermediate microeconomics textbooks. Okay, for the next one is the graph show the relationship between total product TP, MP and AP for competitive firm operating in the short run. The underlying assumption is the production process entail only two input, which is the variable resource labor L and the fixed resource capital K. Graph A show the short run production function, and then graph B show the MP and AP of labor that correspond with the TP curve in the graph A. What we can see is MP is chain in TP associated with a chain in the labor input L. And then we can find by drawing straight line just as MM0 tangent to the TP curve at any point, and then we can determine the slope of the line. And then AP also can be found by drawing a straight line from the origin to the any point to the TP curve, and then we can also find the slope of the line drawn. The slope TP over L is the AP point X associated with the labor input, and TP represented by X on the total product curve. We can notice that when the TP is rising at in decreasing rate, MP is rising and is above the AP, because when MP more than AP, AP is also rising. But when the TP rise at the decreasing rate, MP will fall below MP will fall below AP, that pulling the average down. This relationship are great importance in the contemporary microeconomics theory. For example, they explain the shape of the short run cost curve for the typical firm that basic for the marginal productivity theory of the demand of resource, and underlie the marginal productivity theory of the income distribution. I think that's all from me. Thank you.
Now I will do the conclusions. The beginning of the marginalist school is dated at 1871. William Stanley Jevons and Carl Menger published their influential book on marginal utility theory. Next, the marginalist school opposed to the socialist ideology and government intervention in the economy. Instead, they re-emphasized the use of laissez-faire system pioneered by the classical school. Generally, this school sought to advance the interests of all humankind through promoting a better understanding of how a market system efficiently allocates resources and promote economic liberty. And next, although the marginalist school has its own weaknesses, many of their theories still can be found in contemporary textbooks on principles of economy and microeconomics. For example, Theory of Monopoly and Duopoly by Conant, Theory of Value by Jevons, Indifferent Curve and Exchange and Differences between Average and Marginal Product by Edward. And we can see that the marginal analysis applies to the whole body of microeconomy, progress in mathematizations of economy, and it is only input to the new era of economic thinking, neoclassical economy, which was starting in 1890s, which product a complete and consistent new microeconomic theory. So the marginalist, which was only a transition period between classical and neoclassical schools. And this is our reference. And thank you. This is group 4 presentation. We have finished our presentations.